Welcome to the webinar on listening skills in the BC Society of Transition House Children Who Witness Abuse webinar series. My name is Christy Delabure O'Connor.
And I'm Elizabeth Barbeau.
And we're very happy to be here with you today to talk about this topic. We have 3 goals for this webinar. Our hope is that it gives you an opportunity to explore reflective practice and how it can help you in your work. We want to discuss several key skills in active listening, and we want to provide an overview of the helping process and how it can be used to help the women and children you work with achieve the changes they want to make in their lives. At times in the webinar, we may use the word clients or women or children. Please apply this information to the context that fits best for you and your work. So we have 3 topics we're going to cover over the course of the next 40 or 45 minutes. The first topic is reflective practice. The second is listening skills. And the third is the helping process. So let's begin with the concept of reflective practice. The work that we do in the anti-violence field is intensely personal, and for most of us involves a passionate commitment to social justice and the creation of safer environments for the women and children with whom we work. Our work is complex, and it requires us to have knowledge of many different systems and strategies, and to be able to perform many different tasks, often at the same time. One of the foundational skills that we bring to our work with women and children is our ability to listen effectively and with purpose. This webinar will focus on some of the strategies we can use to listen in ways that support growth, change, and compassion in our work. Before we delve into the nuts and bolts of helping relationships, though, we want to spend some time focusing on the skill of reflection. We believe that our ability to be self-aware and reflect on our own triggers and biases and the impact that these have on our relationships is an integral part of practicing effective listening skills in our work. In the counseling world, this is described as being a reflective practitioner. Being a reflective practitioner involves being open to exploring your personal reactions within the helping relationship. You need to take time to think about, record, and debrief these relationships with a peer mentor or supervisor. You review what happens in these relationships, and you reflect on the impact that these interactions have on the women and children you support. You pay attention to the intentions of your actions, as well as the actual consequences, and you adjust your practice accordingly to suit the needs of the families you support. Reflective practice involves being open to contemplation, to being resourceful and inquisitive about your practice and about yourself. Reflective practice requires an ethical commitment to being conscious and intentional in our interactions with the women and children with whom we work. So when is it helpful to be reflective? We have talked a little bit about why reflective practice is important. Now let's talk about when it can be a useful tool in your practice. Reflection is very helpful when we encounter new and uncertain situations with women and children we support. Perhaps this is the first encounter you have had with a parent who practices religious beliefs that you know very little about, or you are working with a parent who has a history of substance use to manage her mental health challenges. When we encounter life stories that are different than our own, it is natural for us to feel out of our element and sometimes feel challenged to understand. Taking time to reflect on the assumptions that we have made and the actions that we have taken to support the woman or child allows us time to review the intentions and the impact of our actions. For example, imagine you are working with a mother who is Aboriginal and who has lived off-reserve for the majority of her adult life. You may be curious about what cultural resources she has used and that are available to support her, as she helps her children adjust to life in second-stage housing. One of the reasons this comes to mind for you is that you have seen many other women benefit from these services. However, when you ask her about this, the mother responds that she's not interested in Aboriginal resources, and in a more assertive tone states that she really wants you to help her. She also comments quietly that you can't refuse to provide her service because she is Aboriginal. In this example, your intent of connecting the woman to resources that you have experienced as helpful with other women doesn't translate well into action. The client perceives your question as a brush-off, and a lifetime of racism has given her great awareness of how services have let her down and refused to provide her with the support that she needs in the past. So how does reflection help us in this situation? Hopefully you can explain your intent, apologize, and move forward in the moment. After you have moved past this difficult moment, taking time later to reflect on, revise, and plan for a different way of engaging with the woman in the future is an integral part of moving forward from this interaction. Let's talk now about ways we can reflect to help us improve our practice. Time for reflection is something that we have to actively schedule. If we leave it as a task that happens only when we have time, it never happens. I don't know about you, but in my practice, it's very difficult to make things happen unless they're written down in my agenda, unless they're scheduled in my day timer, or I set aside time each week to engage in this type of reflection. It doesn't happen because there's so many other demands on my time. Instead of being able to reflect in this time that we have scheduled, what happens instead is that we wake up in the middle of the night, bothered by that conversation that didn't go quite the way we had planned, but we haven't had time to think through what we could have done differently. Reflective practice is a part of ethical practice and a part of self-care and burnout prevention. There are multiple ways you can build time for reflection into your practice. During clinical supervision, either with your clinical supervisor or with the team that you work with. During peer supervision, in a formal or less structured way, while journal writing, during meditation on your own, or while listening to recorded counseling sessions of the work that you're doing with the children and women that you work with. At this point in the webinar, we're going to invite you to pause and reflect on these questions on this slide. Write down your notes for yourself and bring forward your ideas to your next team meeting. Chat about these ideas with your colleagues. So the first question is, when talking with a woman about her experience, which do you find yourself most drawn to? The story of the woman's life, the present challenges the woman is facing, the woman's future goals, or the woman's personality? Think about why this interests you most and how this interest influences how you listen. Lastly, what are the advantages and disadvantages of your current listening style? All of these questions will help you begin to think about ways to be more reflective about the work that you are doing with women and children in your practice. When you're ready, after you've had a chance to consider these questions, you can restart the webinar.
Topic 2, listening skills. One of the most important aspects of anti-violence work is our ability to connect and form relationships with the women and children who access our services. Our ability to actively listen to women and children supports us in helping them determine what they need and what goals they want to set for themselves. Active listening involves listening to both the content and the feeling within the message that a client is sending. Your ability to paraphrase and respond empathically conveys your acceptance and your non-judgmental approach. Our goal in active listening is to communicate understanding and respect. In this section of the webinar, we will focus on inviting women to begin sharing their stories and learning to listen for and paraphrase the content of the message they are communicating. Hearing and reflecting the feelings involved in the message requires the listener to pay attention to both the spoken and unspoken emotions that are communicated in the story. We will also discuss how to ask questions and use summaries to ensure that you understand the issues of the women and children you are working with. Nonverbal communication is a powerful tool in engaging and building relationships. When we first meet people, our decision about how much to share with them is influenced by our assessment of how open they are to engaging with us. We pay attention to their nonverbal cues and use those as a guide to determine how willing they are to invite us into their emotional and personal spaces. Imagine you've been introduced to a new child in your program. The child is sitting in the main room of your program, coloring at the table. As you enter the room, the child looks up and makes eye contact with you. What nonverbal cues do you use to initiate contact or conversation? Usually, we convey interest in speaking with another person by making eye contact in ways that indicate that we have seen the other person, and by positioning our bodies in ways that the other person feels safe. For example, relaxed arms, a calm face, a warm smile. We may also use appropriate gestures, such as head nodding, to let the child know we are hearing what she's saying. When I listen, the following things are true about me. I'm relaxed, physically and mentally. I check how I feel about what I'm hearing. I observe the speaker. I stay alert. I show active interest. I allow the speaker time and space, and I avoid interrupting. I use eye contact in culturally appropriate ways. Ideally, our nonverbal cues support women and children to tell their stories and to help them feel safer. It's important to reflect on your own nonverbal cues and how your usual style may be encouraging or shutting down open communication. Ask coworkers or other trusted allies for feedback on your communication style. Be open to trying new ways of listening. Listening is not a passive activity. We may mistakenly believe that we're being good listeners when we sit silently as the clients we work with share their stories. In fact, receiving information as the listener is only the first part of your task in active listening. The second component of active listening involves verbally acknowledging and summarizing the key message that the person has shared with you. Paraphrasing is one tool anti-violence workers can use to convey this understanding of the person's story. Paraphrasing involves two steps. First, listening closely to the person's story. And secondly, feeding back to that person a brief, non-judgmental summary of the facts and the thoughts that you heard. When you paraphrase, you communicate to a woman that you have heard and understood what she is saying, and that you're ready to hear more. Being brief, direct, accurate, And specific, when paraphrasing, helps the woman or child to focus on the important issues of their story. Paraphrasing involves more than just repeating what you have heard. You need to use your own words to capture the essence of the person's message. Paraphrasing is a skill you can use alongside nonverbal cues and encouragers. When children tell their stories, they often share quite a bit of information as they begin to talk. There's an understatement. Paraphrasing content in the early stages of the relationship building will help communicate your interest in learning more about that child's story. As trust builds between you, the person may feel safer to share her thoughts and beliefs about her experiences. With this increased level of trust, you can paraphrase the thoughts that this child has had about her situation, in addition to paraphrasing the content of the message. Here's an example. A woman says, "I realized he'd be home soon and that I had to leave immediately if I was going to get away. So I took my gym bag and I left." First listener says, "You took what you could grab quickly and you got out." In this first response, the listener has focused only on the woman's actions and has missed the opportunity to paraphrase her thoughts. The second listener responds this way: "You realized that your window of opportunity to leave was closing, so you took your bag and left." Here, the listener paraphrases both the woman's actions and her thoughts. She realized that this was her chance to escape.
It's important to emphasize here that both of these listeners have done a good job of responding to what the woman has said. There's just a difference in the depth of the response. So the first listener communicates her understanding by paraphrasing back the actions that the woman has taken. The second listener delves a little deeper and begins to reflect the thought process that the woman is also sharing. And this can help us go deeper into the conversation. It helps us build trust and rapport.
It also gives us an opportunity to check whether we have correctly understood what the woman was communicating. Because the woman can then say, "Oh, no, that's not the reason I did it. I did it because blah, 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 blah." Right? So it's a good way to double check that you're actually hearing what the woman is trying to communicate. Hearing and paraphrasing the content and thoughts a woman has had about her experience is a valuable listening skill. However, we also need to be able to hear and reflect the feelings that a woman is experiencing. When we reflect a woman's feelings back to her, we are exploring the emotional level of her story. When we do this, we need to be aware of the increased sense of vulnerability that woman may feel. For example, when you respond to someone with empathy, you are more likely to elicit an emotional response from her. I don't know whether you've ever had this experience, but when I've been in a difficult situation, I can usually hold it together right up until someone I care about expresses compassion, and that's when I lose it, right? When I feel their empathy, that's when I feel safe to let my real feelings come out. It's the same for the women and children that we're working with. Reflecting feelings, while at the same time paraphrasing content, helps us build trust and rapport with the women and children. At the same time, we should ensure that the conversation is happening at a time and in a place where the person feels safe to explore their emotions. Sometimes, people say directly how they're feeling. At other times, we know how they're feeling by a combination of what they say, "I'm feeling low," the tone of voice, which might be quiet, the speech might be slowed, their facial expressions, and their body language. Through learning to paraphrase content and reflect feelings, you will be able to more accurately and deeply communicate your understanding of the person's message. Being empathetic involves communicating your understanding of a woman's feelings as if they were your own, while at the same time retaining your awareness of yourself as a separate person. Empathy is about demonstrating understanding, caring, support, and trust. In order to communicate empathy, we need to be self-aware and develop a strong feeling vocabulary, which we can describe our own and others' emotional experiences with. It involves being genuine and respectful, communicating a non-judgmental approach, and a sense of openness to understanding a person's experience. It requires us to give our attention and focus to that person's experience and to put our own biases aside in our attempt to find out how that person is experiencing their situation. Marshall Rosenblum describes empathy beautifully. I continue to be amazed by the healing power of empathy. Time and again, I have witnessed people transcending the paralyzing effects of psychological pain when they have sufficient contact with someone who can hear them empathically. As listeners, we don't need insights into psychological dynamics or training in psychotherapy. What is essential is our ability to be present to what's really going on within, to the unique feelings and needs a person is experiencing in that very moment. Similarly, the renowned psychologist Carl Rogers taught that genuine empathic understanding is the core of any helping relationship. He describes empathy this way. It means entering the private perceptual world of the other and becoming thoroughly at home in it. It involves being sensitive, moment by moment, to the changing felt meanings which flow in this other person, to the fear or rage or tenderness or confusion or whatever that he or she is experiencing. It means temporarily living in the other's life, moving about in it delicately without making judgments. Empathic understanding helps us connect with women and children and establish trust. It also helps them to feel in control of the helping process. Through communicating empathic understanding, you are communicating a desire to see the world from their unique point of view. Empathy involves hearing what is alive in the person at that moment. It's our opportunity to be open to the experience of another. An empathic response has two components. First, as the listener, you must recognize the person's feelings and thoughts by picking up on the verbal and nonverbal cues. Second, responding to the person's feelings and thoughts through naming their emotional experience and inviting further dialogue through connecting this emotional experience to the appropriate content, the facts from the story. People often talk about their lives through their description of 4 domains, which are visualized here in this diagram. The first one is our experiences. These are the things that happen to you. In the second quadrant, we have our thoughts. These are the ideas and opinions that you have about your behaviors and experiences and feelings. In the third quadrant, we have actions, which we sometimes describe as behaviors. These are the things that you do. And in the last quadrant, our feelings. These are the emotions that we have about our experiences and our thoughts and behaviors. When we respond empathically, we can respond with information from any of these 4 domains. Here are 4 examples of reflections. First, a reflection of experiences. I can hear how angry you're feeling with your husband because he froze your bank account. The second one is a reflection of the person's thoughts. It sounds like you're feeling pretty disappointed because you never imagined he would take away your access to your own money. The third one is a reflection of behavior. I get the sense that you feel disbelief, and checking your bank account online helps you remind yourself of what he has actually done. And the fourth one is a reflection of her feelings. It almost sounds as though you're feeling sad about being doubtful because you said you anticipated that he would do this eventually. The more completely we can reflect a woman's feelings, thoughts, behaviors, and experiences, the more comprehensive and depth-filled our conversations will be. By being specific in paraphrasing the content, we let a woman know that we've been tracking the details of her story. By using feeling words that match the intensity of a woman's experience, you will move more into depth-filled conversations with her.
Another useful skill for us to use in active listening is questions. When used well, questions can help women and children clarify what they mean, expand their stories, and gain deeper understanding of their experiences. However, too many or poorly timed or irrelevant questions can destroy empathy, prevent a woman or child from determining the direction of the conversation, or lead a person to conclusions that satisfy the anti-violence worker's needs and beliefs about what would help. An invitation to share more feels very different from an interrogation. So think about times where you have felt that you were getting rapid-fire questions about a particular situation from someone, as opposed to questions that help you think about the experience, but also give you time to reflect. I think about times where I've had to apply for a passport or a driver's license, and there's a list of questions that the person has to ask me, and I don't feel like we're engaging in a conversation, but rather that they're just trying to get information from me. That's very different than the type of questions we use when we're talking about questions in active listening. So, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've had the example as a helper of asking too many questions. And sometimes I do it when my intention is to indicate my interest in the person's story. And I feel like by asking questions that satisfy my curiosity, I feel like I'm showing them that I care about their story. But I've had feedback from colleagues reminding me that I'm interrupting their story. And I'm not there to satisfy my curiosity. I'm there to give them a space and a time to tell their story, to tell the elements of their story that they want to tell, and to not bother with the elements that they don't feel like telling or that seem irrelevant to them, whether or not I might be curious about it. So I've had to learn to really tone my questions down and allow more quiet space in conversations while the other person is collecting their thoughts and deciding how they want to move forward and what they feel like telling me. So that's been a real learning for me that I've gotten from feedback from my colleagues.
And it's tricky.
It is.
It's tricky to know when to ask questions and what kinds of questions to ask that help the person that's speaking stay in control of the way the information is shared.
Because it's different with every client.
Absolutely. So some of what we're going to talk about here is the difference between open and closed questions and how those can be useful at different times. Sometimes we ask questions when we feel unsure of what to say next. When we ask questions in these moments, a woman or child may feel unheard or disrespected, as the control of the conversation is placed in the hands of the anti-violence worker rather than the person who's doing the storytelling. Likewise, we may ask questions about things we are curious about, just as Elizabeth just said, but that ultimately result in the focus shifting away from a person's increased self-understanding. When used well, though, questions keep the focus on the woman or child and help her to understand her experience more fully. An important distinction is between closed and open questions. Closed questions are used when you need to find out specific information, especially in emergency situations. Closed questions narrow the focus of the conversation. So for example, you might ask, how old are your children? Do you have access to your bank account right now? Is your partner home right now? These questions give you a yes or no answer, and they can be very helpful when we're assessing risk. Closed questions result in brief answers. Anti-violence workers are then prompted to ask another question. This type of interaction does not invite open dialogue between us. Overuse of closed questions also poses the risk of the anti-violence worker's beliefs and values guiding the conversation. In contrast, open questions invite women to choose the focus of the conversation and to take responsibility and control for the way information is shared with the anti-violence worker. When we ask open-ended questions, we convey respect for women by inviting them to explain their experiences according to their own thoughts and feelings. So some examples of open-ended questions include, what prompted your decision to leave today? What would you like me to know about your relationship with your partner? What would you like to see happen during your time here? Be cautious in the use of why questions. They can convey judgment and lead a woman toward the anti-violence worker's preferred goals and solutions. For example, asking a woman, why is it important that your children continue to see their father, can imply that the listener has an opinion about whether or not this is a good idea. And you may very well have an opinion about whether or not you think it's a good idea. However, it's important for us not to convey that opinion either directly or indirectly through the way that we listen to the woman. Instead of asking a why question, you could instead ask, what things are you considering in making your decision about whether your children will continue to see their father? When used well, questions are a helpful tool in active listening. Questions are useful in gathering more information. However, they don't inherently convey empathy or understanding. To help women understand the context of your question, it can be helpful to preface any question you ask with a reflection of content and feeling, and respond to the answer you receive with an empathic response. In a crisis response team that I worked on, we used to call it the empathy sandwich, that we would precede a question with empathy and we would follow up a question with empathy. And then we knew that we were still really staying connected and hopefully not guiding the conversation in a way that felt uncomfortable or not the way the client wanted to go. Summaries provide a brief review of the conversation between an anti-violence worker and a woman or child. A summary can highlight the relationship between a woman's thoughts and feelings, bring the discussion of a particular topic to a close, and create an opportunity for a person to see the bigger picture. Summaries can be useful when the conversation seems to be losing direction or when a woman just feels stuck. When a conversation appears to be losing direction, a summary can help refocus both participants. If you feel like the conversation is going in circles, it may be beneficial to examine the ways that you are inviting and encouraging a woman to repeat the same details. A summary can indicate to a child or woman that you have heard and understood the details of the story, and you are ready for her to move on to a deeper exploration of the implications, feelings, and meanings. A summary can also be used when a woman appears to be stuck for words and unsure of what to say next. In this instance, inviting a woman to help you summarize the key points from your discussion can help you both move forward. For example, you might say something like, I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to spend a moment highlighting what has stood out for you in our discussion so far. Or with a child, you might say, what's the one really important thing we need to remember from what we've talked about so far? This invites a woman to state what matters to her, gather her thoughts before moving on to the next topic. Summaries can also be useful at the end of conversations. When you highlight key topics and themes that you have heard in a person's story, you validate her experiences and reconfirm that you have actively listened to her experiences in a respectful and supportive manner. At this point in the webinar, we invite you to pause and spend some time thinking about and writing your ideas about these reflection questions. What are your strengths in terms of active listening skills? What ways would you like to develop your skills further? And what resources are available to help you develop your skills? Let's now talk about feedback as part of good listening. Part of our role as helpers in a helping relationship is to provide guidance to women about how to further their growth and development. At times, this may involve providing feedback to women about how their behavior is being perceived by you, the helper, and what role you see their behavior occupying in the creation and maintenance of some of the challenges they're facing. While giving feedback to women and children can feel challenging, it is an essential component in helping them recognize what they are doing that is helping them and what things they are doing that are contributing to their less than satisfactory current life experiences for themselves. Giving feedback can be challenging and something we may shy away from because we fear the other person's reaction. Patterson describes 3 common reactions to our discomfort in giving feedback to others. Avoidance. You avoid giving corrective feedback at all. Your reactions to others are unacknowledged, and thus your relationships are not based on genuine, honest communication. Some people provide feedback in a way that can be perceived as aggressive. Because of your discomfort with giving feedback, you may act out aggressively when forced to provide feedback. Feedback provided in the context of anger is unlikely to be productive. Vagueness is another roadblock to good feedback. Sometimes we believe we are being gentle, when in fact what we are being is imprecise or vague. Vague feedback is unhelpful because it lacks clarity, directness, and an invitation for the listener to change their behavior. Think about how you typically react when you realize you need to give feedback to someone that you fear will make him or her uncomfortable. Examining your own natural tendencies in giving feedback will help you determine the ways that you need to stretch yourself and your comfort level as you practice the skill of giving feedback within the helping relationship. Guidelines for giving feedback. There are 2 common types of feedback, positive and corrective. In positive feedback, helpers provide encouraging acknowledgement about how women and children are moving successfully toward their goals. In corrective feedback, helpers provide information about the ways in which they perceive women are moving away from their goals or engaging in actions that may contribute to problematic behavior. Egan suggests the following guidelines for corrective feedback. It should always be given in the spirit of caring and should be paired with positive feedback. It should be concise and direct. It should be focused on observable behaviors rather than on abstract concepts like personality characteristics or evaluative comments like, "You did a great job." It should be given in reasonable amounts with consideration taken as to how much a person can absorb at once. A person should be invited to give the helper feedback on the feedback, and they should be helped to find alternative methods of working toward their goals. Feedback should be directly linked to the goals that the woman or child has set, and it should include an exploration of the effects of not changing versus the effects of changing and moving towards those goals. Vocal tone and body language used by the listener during feedback are also very important. A gentle, accepting vocal quality and a relaxed body language communicate that your intention is to join with the woman or child in exploring the feedback rather than trying to create a confrontational environment. Timing is also key. Feedback should be given when there is ample time to both give and discuss feedback thoroughly. Feedback should not be given at the end of a counseling session when the woman does not have time to share reactions or discuss its implications with you. Engaging in feedback with women provides you another opportunity to deepen the connection and trust in your helping relationships. Done with compassion, care, and skill, feedback creates an environment where women and children feel challenged in a positive manner to examine their current behaviors and are invited to begin considering new ways of being and acting in the world.
Topic 3, the helping process. Oftentimes, as we're improving our listening skills, we experience moments of frustration. It's hard to learn new ways of being in relationship, and some of these skills may involve thinking about our roles at work and our personalities in new ways. Giving yourself time and opportunities to practice these skills in low-stress environments can help you get more comfortable with them. One strategy we suggest is practicing your active listening skills in response to dialogue on television shows or movies. Characters are often very emotional, especially in TV dramas, and these can provide excellent content for you to practice your skills. I love talking back to the TV, especially ads. As you learn and refine the fundamental listening skills, you may also find yourself wondering how they all fit together to help people make the changes they want for themselves in their lives. It's all well and fine to offer empathy to a woman, but how might that help her decide where she wants to live once she leaves the transition house? It can be helpful to think about how these listening skills fit together within the roadmap of the helping process. In this graphic, you can see how the relationship building skills that we've been talking about in this webinar are required throughout your work with women and children. We need to be able to paraphrase, reflect, offer empathy, and ask useful, open and closed questions throughout the entire process. We begin with relationship building and establishing trust in the helping relationship. Without a sense that you are trustworthy, reliable, and consistent, a woman is unlikely to move to the next stages of the helping relationship with you. Once you and a woman have established a good working relationship, together you can begin the assessment process. This conversation is focused on what the woman sees as the primary challenge in her life and how she would like her life to be in the future. Assessment leads naturally into goal setting. Once we have collaboratively figured out what is not working in a woman's life, we can help her determine what she would prefer instead. Goals give women something concrete to work towards. Good goals are specific, attainable, and measurable. With goals set, we work together with women about action plans. How will the woman achieve the goals she has set for herself? What strategies will she use to help her get where she wants to go? What strategies will you use as a helper to support her in her journey? The final stage in the helping process is evaluation. At this point, we discuss how the woman has progressed. We evaluate whether the action plan was useful in helping her attain her goals. We also discuss whether the goals were attainable or whether we need to revise them to be more realistic for her to work towards. Evaluation can occur at the end of the helping relationship, but it often occurs throughout. As we know, most times in life, plans do not unfold 100% the way we intend, and support and refinement of goals and action plans is part of the helping relationship throughout. Detailed information about how to work within each of these stages of the helping relationship is beyond the scope of this webinar. However, we wanted to provide you with this information to help you keep the big picture in mind as you continue to refine your listening and helping skills. So what makes somebody a good helper? There's no one way to be an effective helper. We all bring our own strengths and gifts to the work that we do. In addition to appreciating and building on our strengths, we need to be self-aware about our limitations and the ethical boundaries of our roles. Research points to common qualities shared by people who do well in the helping professions. First, a positive, accepting view of other people. This involves communicating a non-judgmental attitude with warmth and caring, and displaying a genuine interest in helping people to achieve the changes they want for themselves. Second, good self-esteem and stable mental wellness. Sound familiar? Being self-aware and using good self-reflection skills to know and work on strengths and limitations. We need to have the courage to look at our own lives and take risks to change and move forward if we want to ask others to do the same. Good self-care skills. Also sound familiar? Having a fulfilling life outside of the workplace allows us to refill our energy tanks so that we can be present and supportive in our helping work with others. Number 4, creativity and knowledge. Good helpers have a solid understanding of human relationships and how people change. Through our work, we are exposed to of great pain. We need to sit in this pain and look for points of resilience and hope. This takes courage. We also need to have courage to take risks and actions when there is no roadmap of exactly how to move forward. We talk with others, we consult research, we learn new skills, and ultimately, in each day, we have to have the courage to act to the best of our ability and hope that what we are doing makes a positive difference in a person's life. We'd like to invite you to take a few minutes right now to reflect on some of these questions. You can pause the webinar, take some notes, and restart the webinar when you've had a chance. How true for you is each of these statements? How can you grow? You believe that most people are basically good and striving to improve themselves. You enjoy people and believe they can change. You have good self-esteem and at this point in your life, a stable level of mental wellness. You do not become overly involved with those you are helping. You know your limits and you are able to set boundaries. You are a curious person who is interested in learning more about relationships and how to help people. You are a creative, flexible person and are approaching differences with a curious, appreciative approach. You have enough courage to examine your own life and seek support when you need it. In this webinar, we have given an overview of reflective practice, some key components of active listening, and we've touched on the process of the helping relationship. We hope you found the information useful and that the questions for reflection have prompted you to think more about your work and ways that you can continue your professional development journey. We have included a list of references that we utilized in the preparation of this webinar in case you wish to do further reading on any of these topics.
Thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you so much.